Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. According to a story that has circulated in various forms since the 1950s, there is an object in Earth orbit that should not be there, a dark, anomalous satellite in a polar orbit, approximately 13,000 years old, whose signals were first detected by Nikola Tesla and later decoded by astronomer Duncan Lunan as a star map pointing to the star Epsilon Boötis. The Black Knight satellite, as it became known, was supposedly photographed by Space Shuttle Endeavour in 1998 during the ISS construction mission STS-88. The 1998 photograph exists and shows a dark, irregular object in space. NASA has explained it as a thermal blanket lost during an EVA, but the Black Knight story has continued to grow, incorporating the photograph into a narrative that preceded it by decades. The actual history of the Black Knight legend is itself a fascinating case study in how a myth assembles itself from unconnected fragments. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the expanding frontier of unexplained cosmic phenomena, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Space is not quiet. The universe is filled with electromagnetic signals, from the cosmic microwave background radiation left over from the Big Bang to the steady roar of stellar activity at every wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum. Against this noise, radio astronomers look for something specific, signals that are narrowband, repeating, and structured, the signatures of intelligence rather than nature. Natural processes tend to produce broadband emissions spread across many frequencies. A narrowband signal at a single precise frequency suggests something deliberately tuned, and deliberate tuning implies a tuner. The search for such signals has been ongoing since 1960, when Frank Drake pointed a radio telescope at two nearby stars and listened. In the 60-plus years since, the instrumentation has grown enormously in sensitivity, and the sky survey coverage has expanded from a handful of stars to millions. The verdict, so far, is ambiguous. No confirmed, repeating signal from an extraterrestrial intelligence has been received, but several anomalous signals have been detected, investigated, and not definitively explained, including at least one that, had it been received today, would meet every criterion the scientific community had previously agreed would constitute first contact. The silence of the cosmos is not total, it is merely inscrutable. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Black Knight satellite story has several distinct components that have been merged over time. In 1954, UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe claimed that the U.S. Air Force had detected two unidentified satellites in orbit before any artificial satellites had been launched. The first satellite, Sputnik, was not launched until 1957. The Air Force denied the claim. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered, in 1960, the U.S. military detected an anomalous radar signature in a polar orbit that was described as a dark satellite. It was subsequently identified as the Discoverer 8 satellite, which had lost contact with ground control and was tumbling in an unexpected orbit. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. In 1973, Scottish astronomer Duncan Lunan analyzed a series of long-delayed radio echoes recorded in the 1920s and proposed they encoded a star map pointing to Epsilon Boötis. He suggested the source was an alien probe in Earth orbit from Epsilon Boötis that had been waiting for 13,000 years. He later retracted this interpretation. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the STS-88 photograph taken in 1998 by Space Shuttle astronauts shows a dark, irregular object that appears against the backdrop of space. NASA explanation is that the object is a thermal blanket, specifically a trunnion pin thermal cover, lost during EVA operations. The thermal blanket was catalogued as orbital debris and decayed into the atmosphere. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the consolidation of these disparate elements into a single Black Knight satellite. Narrative occurred gradually through Internet-era alternative history writing, which connected the Keyhoe claim, the 1960 radar object, Lunan's retracted star map analysis, and the STS-88 photograph into a single story that no individual piece of evidence supports. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Black Knight satellite legend is a composite mythology assembled from unconnected historical incidents, an Air Force misunderstanding of satellite detection, a lost satellite tumbling in an unexpected orbit, a retracted astronomical interpretation, and a NASA photograph of lost EVA equipment. No single anomalous object ties these elements together. This is the debunking conclusion supported by examining each component separately. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that there is a genuine anomalous object in polar Earth orbit of unknown origin that has been detected multiple times since the 1950s, and the various incidents incorporated into the Black Knight legend are independent confirmations of a persistent, unidentified object. This requires accepting all elements as related despite the lack of any physical continuity between them. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Black Knight story, while largely mythological in its current form, reflects a genuine pattern of anomalous objects in Earth orbit that have been detected and dismissed without full investigation, and that may represent something real that has been systematically misidentified or suppressed. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy. Why in science? What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes NASA identification of the STS-88 photograph as a lost thermal blanket, combined with the blanket's subsequent cataloging as orbital debris and eventual decay, is direct evidence against the photograph representing an anomalous satellite. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. The 1960 dark satellite was subsequently identified as a specific satellite, Discoverer 8, that had lost contact, removing this element of the story from the realm of unexplained phenomena. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Duncan Lunan's retraction of his Epsilon Boötis star map interpretation removes the 13,000-year-old waiting alien probe element from the story, leaving the Black Knight legend without its most compelling component. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Black Knight satellite story continues to circulate widely despite the specific debunking of its major components. It is an instructive example of how a composite myth can acquire apparent coherence and credibility through the accumulation of unconnected, anomalous reports. The real history of the story, how Kehoe's 1954 claim, the 1960 Discoverer 8 sighting, Lunan's 1973 star map analysis, and the 1998 STS-88 photograph were assembled into a unified legend, is a fascinating case study in the sociology of alternative history. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Black Knight satellite, truth behind the myth, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Black Knight satellite ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions, it is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.